Great. Thank you very much.
No problem. All right, good morning, everyone. Today we're going to start chapter 14. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go to the entire chapter, but the certain area that is very important, I want to go over it with you. And you'll see at the end of the chapter the reasoning behind it, why I'm doing this. Couple of things. I'm sure you already know your final exam is on December 17. It's at 8 o'clock. So it's not 9:30. Please do not make that mistake. It's at 8 o'clock from 8 to 10. And so we have 2 hours. And I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to send you the email 15 minutes before 8 o'clock. And you have 15 minutes after 10 o'clock to upload it in the beach board. So please make a note of that so you don't get confused in thinking that your test is going to be at 9 o'clock or 9:30. So it is at 8 o'clock until 10 o'clock. Now, one other thing, as you all know, the project is due in 3 weeks on the 29th. So I'm thinking that by now you completed the project, you have written your report, and now you're working on a PowerPoint presentation. And so please, if there is any problem, there is any issues, please let me know. Now, chapter 14, it's basically, we're going to talk about thermodynamics properties of gas vapor mixture. The biggest example of a gas vapor mixture is basically air. Air, it contains oxygen and nitrogen, but in air there is a moisture. As you have noticed, we call it relative humidity. So there's always a humidity in the air. So that humidity is a water vapor that it's involved in the air. So in an air conditioning process, we take the temperature and the pressure of outside air and we condition it to get to the point 2. Now, none of us, when we talk about air conditioning, automatically think about the cooling system, but that's not right. If you pay attention to it, it says air conditioning. That means you condition the air. Conditioning the air is taking a worst case scenario, that outside air, conditioned to our comfort zone. Our comfort zone, in basically, it's a 20 degrees Celsius or 76 to 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything above that, we're not comfortable. Now, 1 or 2 degrees might not hurt us that much, but the temperature of 105 degrees or 40 degrees Celsius, that is too hot. That is really make us very uncomfortable. That's the summertime. What about wintertime? If you have a 10 degrees Fahrenheit temperature outside, or 5 degrees below 0 Celsius, that's very uncomfortable. So when we're talking about conditioning the air, there are 3 components involved. We can do the heating, we can do the cooling, we can either add moisture to the air or take the moisture away from the air. If you travel throughout the United States, or some of you that live outside the United States, you have seen a lot of crazy, air temperatures and relative humidity. For instance, in the summertime, if you go to Florida, you have a temperature of probably 90 degrees Fahrenheit, but the relative humidity is about 85%, 88%. That means you are breathing water, basically, not air. So it's like somebody's choking you. And that's not healthy, and that is not good for us. So we need to condition that air to make it cooler and remove some of that humidity from there. If, let's say, you go to places like Sweden or even Boston, Massachusetts during the winter time, extremely cold and at the same time very high humidity. Again, we need to warm it up and remove the humidity. The opposite of that, it's, for instance, California, Nevada, Arizona. Summertime, it's hot, but it's so dry. Makes your skin dry. Too much dry air is not healthy for us either. So what do we do in California during the summertime? We cool the temperature, we add humidity to the air to make it comfortable for us. So as you can see, when we're talking about air conditioning, it's not just the air conditioning in your car that you provide the cooling for you. That's not right. Yes, in your car, there's a button that says AC, air conditioning. You push it, and then during the summertime, you get a cold air, you're comfortable. But that's a very wrong way of saying it, because when we're talking about air conditioning, there are a lot more into it. So that's the reason I want you to pay attention to it. Now, some of the parameters that we have when it comes to mixture of basically air and water, one is what we call omega. Omega is defined as absolute humidity. And by definition, this absolute humidity is basically the mass of vapor divided by mass of air, which is basically, this means dry air. So the mass of vapor divided by the ratio of the mass of vapor divided by mass of the dry air, that is called absolute humidity. Now, we also have something else that we're all familiar with. We hear it every day in the news. This is basically a very highly technical way of looking at it. But what we hear in the news or watching the TV, a weather person tell us, it's a relative humidity. Now, the relative humidity is a little different, and we use it a lot. And usually we show that in a percentage way. Relative humidity is 40%. Relative humidity is 80%. Relative humidity is 60%. Now, the relative humidity is a little different, and that is the humidity of partially saturated mixture divided by the humidity of 100% saturated mixture. That's why we show that as a percentage. Now, in order to basically, if you want to look at it like this equation, oops, this is the equation, and M of A is a dry air. If you want to look at this same way, the phi is defined of mass of vapor divided the mass of G. M of G is basically the mass of 100%, humid air at a given temperature. So we'll talk about all of these later. So that would be the relative humidity definition, and that's the difference between the two. Now, as you might know, when we're talking about air, the air has 21% oxygen and 79% nitrogen. This is what we call pure air. However, what we are breathing is not pure air, because there are so many other things, impurities, mixed with that air. First of all, there is a H2O. That is the moisture that is in the air. So that's one thing, which is not bad. It's not unhealthy. But we have greenhouse gas emission, gas that is involved. Everything that comes out of our tailpipe, the power plants, the heavy industrial facilities, all of that goes to the atmosphere and come back and get mixed with air. So the air that we are breathing is not just the oxygen and nitrogen. We are lucky if we get about 19% oxygen and about 77% nitrogen, and the rest of it are the impurities that it's involved in the air. So air outside is very unhealthy, but we don't have a choice. We have to breathe, especially when we work, when we go out. So we do our best to clean the air. Years ago, we didn't have a catalytic converter in our car. So this smog check that you have heard, that smog is a short for smoke and fog. That's what they call it, the smog. And that helped a lot because that catalytic converter basically will take a lot of impurities from the combustion of our engine, from our car, filter it out, if you will, and send much less combustion product into the atmosphere. We do the same thing in a power plant. In a power plant, fossil fuel power plant, we have a system called SCR, or selective catalytic converter, that it's basically designed for the power plant. It does the same thing that a catalytic converter does in your car, but it's more sophisticated and much, much bigger than we have in your car, of course, to reduce as much as we can the greenhouse gas emission to the atmosphere. So we have done a lot of good things in the past 25, 30 years, but not good enough. Let's put it that way. We still have a lot more to go. If we can get rid of a fossil fuel, that would be fantastic. Air would be much more cleaner. But we have stuck with it. So we're going to talk about absolute humidity, relative humidity. We're going to talk about how we approach to basically design the air conditioning the easiest way. Keep in mind, we're not getting involved in the actual design of air conditioning. We just want to show you how you can condition air, basically. Simple side of it, not in details. Because air conditioning, there's a course that Cal State Long Beach provide, and that's a completely different course that you need to get involved. Now, let me erase this side. Now, you may remember in the physics, we had Dalton's law of partial pressure. What Dalton's law is saying that the total pressure P1 plus little PI, actually, let's split it this way. This is probably better. So the total pressure is equal to summation of all partial pressure. That's what basically Dalton was talking about. Now, if you look at that, the total pressure that we have let's say this is for air, would be equal to partial pressure of vapor plus partial pressure of dry air. So if we say the outside pressure is 14.7 psia or 10 kilopascal, that pressure is equal to how much is the partial pressure of the vapor in the air and what would be the partial pressure of a dry air in the air. So if we add them together, we get the atmospheric pressure or outside temperature, outside pressure, air pressure. Now, knowing that, if we go back to omega, we said that's a mass of vapor divided by the mass of a dry air. Now, I can replace the mass with R, this is the volume divided by, since this is for the vapor, that's R of vapor times volume of the vapor divided by R of vapor times temperature. So these two will cancel each other out. And then we have down here, air, now, if we are keeping the controlled volume, that means the volume is gone, and we keep the temperature the same, so this ratio basically changes to omega to be 0.622 times partial pressure of V divided by total pressure minus partial pressure of A. So omega as an equation would be 0.622. This 0.622 is dividing the universal constant of, vapor divided by universal constant of a, dry air times partial pressure of vapor dividing it by total pressure minus partial pressure of a dry air. This will give us, the omega. And again, this is right here. That's what the substitution was. Now, if I want to do the same thing for basically phi or relative humidity, phi for relative humidity, we said it's the mass of V divided by mass as a 100% saturated and at a given, basically, temperature. So if we do the same thing with it here, this time would be P of V times V divided by R of V times T, that's P of G times V divided by R of VT. I'm sorry, these are the pressure I put by mistake R. This is no, it's correct. And if you do the same thing at the end, because these are going to go, at the end we can write, instead of this, we can write the value of phi is equal to partial pressure of vapor divided by partial pressure of a saturated. Let me write it down. P of G is partial pressure of 100% saturated, no, 100% dry air. At given temperature. For instance, if I say the temperature is 32 degrees Celsius, you go to the table, air table, A17, and you find the value of P of G from that table. That's what it is. So this is more important than the omega, because, as I said, omega is generally used in a different aspect if you want to design an air conditioning system. But relative humidity is something that we deal with that day in and day out, all the time. Now, one of the things you need to understand, the relative humidity is between 0 and 100, percent. Now, if relative humidity is equal to 0, that means we have 100% dry air. That is very, very bad. I mean, if you have, we never get to that condition, but if you ever get to that condition, our body gets dehydrated and within a few minutes we'll die because our body cannot take that. If you get to the 100%, then again, what you're breathing completely water instead of air. So the water gets into your lung, you get pneumonia, and you're going to get, die. So these two extremes is not healthy for us. Not healthy. We're not survive under those conditions, basically. So this relative humidity is always between 0 and 100. And we try to keep it, regardless of a system, whether it's the SI system or English unit, doesn't matter. We try always to keep this somewhere between 50 to 65%. This is something that we can be comfortable with. 60% would be ideal, but it's hard to get an ideal. We can do it with air conditioning, but outside temperature or outside air, we have no control of it. So ideally, we want to stay within 50 to 65% relative humidity. Anything more than that, if it's a few points, it's okay. But if it gets to 80s, then it becomes uncomfortable. If it gets less than a 50, if it's a few points, we're still okay. But if you get to 20 and 30 degrees, for instance, when you go to Mojave Desert, the outside temperature is 115 degrees in summertime, 115 Fahrenheit, and the relative humidity, it's about 10–15%. So if you stranded there, God forbid, you have probably 15 to 20 minutes before you die, because your body gets dehydrated so quickly, you won't be able to survive. So that's basically little information for you guys. But remember this becomes handy, that's very important. Now, I talk about all of this now to tell you how we condition the air. What is the best way of doing that? Let's see. Now, let's see if we have looked at these 4 quadrants there. Now, if I go to the right, I'm doing the heating. If I go to the opposite way, I'm doing the cooling. If I go at the top, that's humidifying. And if I go down the opposite way, is dehumidifying. These are the 4 areas that we are concerned about the air conditioning. However, when we design our air conditioning, we never ever just do the heating, because that's not how it works. We never ever just do the cooling, and that's not good either. We never just keep adding humidity, because ultimately it's going to drive us crazy, or taking the humidity out. So in real air conditioning design, the way we do the work, we don't work in these 4 quadrants. We work right here. Whoops. So any air conditioning devices that we have, we constantly either heating and adding humidity at the same time, or heating and taking the humidity down at the same time. On this side, we either cooling and adding humidity, or cooling and taking the humidity away. So the examples that I talked about before, if I'm in California, what I'm doing, I'm adding humidity and cooling. So in California, I'm basically Summertime, I'm working here. Now, if I'm in, let's say, Florida or Southeast United States or in Saudi Arabia or in the Middle East, most of the Middle East, or even in China, Japan, Vietnam, Singapore, summertime, I'm doing the cooling and taking away the humidity because it's hot and it's humid. So I have to reduce the humidity, reduce the air temperature. So cooling and dehumidification at the same time. On the winter time, again, if you're in the desert area, you have a dry air to start with, like Las Vegas, and it's very cold. So you need to add humidity while you're doing the heating. And if you're in Sweden or Boston, Massachusetts, or Minnesota, you need to reduce the humidity while you're adding the heat to the air. So the way we can get to our comfort zone is basically doing one of these things, not just straight heating, straight cooling, or straight humidifying or dehumidifying. We always do the combination. So that's basically the art of a, air conditioning design. Let's see. Now, we're going to get back to this again. Let's see. The first time we decided to have the air conditioning, so we had hot air coming this direction through this ducting, and we wanted to get some cold air on this side. So what we did, we added water. This hot, dry air went over this water, it cooled it off, add moisture to it, and that became our comfort zone. This is the first what we call swamp cooler that we basically created, trying to basically do the cooling. Now, a few thousand years ago, people doing the cooling completely differently, which today, most of the architects for the new design, they're trying to go back a couple of thousand years and basically use that technology to create cooling without using any air conditioning. And that was something very unique. This is for your general information. This happened to the old Persian Empire. In the south of old Persia, the temperature was getting very high, and that time, 2,500 years ago, 2,600 years ago, they didn't have any air conditioning, they didn't have electricity. So they came up with a system that was really interesting. They designed their homes or their tent or whatever the situation was. Like that. Now, air, when it gets hot, has a tendency to go up. And because of that funnel, the way they design it, it will make this air to speed up and go up. So if the hot air goes up, that air needs to be replaced, right? So the air was replacing by cold air coming in. And here, they will put a little small pool of water. So this storm cooler idea that we invented like 67 years ago, 80 years ago, we learned that from those guys. They did this naturally, without any air conditioning, without any fans or any electricity, nothing. That's how they got the cooling. That's a very interesting thing that they did. And today we're trying to basically design our schools. There's a school I give in Arizona that's designed using this kind of a concept. I'm not sure, because there was an architect. I was in one of the conferences, I was a guest speaker, and the guy after me was an architect talking about these air conditioning things. And it was amazing. I don't know if he designed, it was in process of designing it or building it. I don't know what stage was in, but that's what he was trying to do. To basically do air conditioning of the school without using any electrical equipment. So this is another concept. Now, we get to a point, there's an easy way to basically formulate your thought process of how you want to design the air conditioning. And of course, there's a hard way that is sitting there and designing. You need a computer program, you need a lot of things to do that. Now, what happened, they developed a chart. It's called psychometric chart. Psychometric chart, it looks like the one I just erased. Oh, sorry. Psychometric chart, there's no R. Now, the psychometric chart is extremely important in design of air conditioning. Most of the air conditioning repairmen have a little chart in their pocket that they always look into it, and you see why. Now, the psychometric chart is pretty interesting. First of all, there are two charts in your textbook. One in English unit, one is SI unit. If you have a edition, 9th edition, it's on page 943 and 987. These are the psychometric chart for SI unit and for English unit. That's in Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 on your textbook. If you have a 8th edition, they are in pages of 927 and 971. So those are the chart that you can find in the back of your textbook. And if you do have it, it would be great because you can follow right now. Here, if you look at the psychometric chart, you see a whole bunch of numbers here. Now, this axis of the chart called TDB is dry bulb temperature. Basically, this is outside temperature. We call that TDB. If you look at on this axis, you see a whole bunch of numbers. This represents omega, the absolute humidity. Now, if you look at this curve, and then you'll see right behind it a whole bunch of curves like this. Now, these curves represent relative humidity. And if you look at it, it says 70%, 60%, 20%. So you see all the percentage of the relative humidity. That's free. Now, the last one is where the phi is 100%. So we have 100%, then you go 90%, 80%, 70, 60, all the way down. So this represents the relative humidity. That's absolute humidity, this is relative humidity. Now, one thing I forgot. There's a straight line outside of this chart with a bunch of numbers. These represent enthalpy. Now, there are lines going this direction. These lines represent wet bulb temperature. And a wet bulb temperature is basically, it's the temperature that we desire to get if we can. So if our point one is a dry bulb, we want to get to basically the comfort zone, which is a wet bulb temperature. There's also the very crowded chart. There are lines going this direction. These represent the volume. is important in air conditioning that what we call the amount of air changes, that's the amount of the volume of the air that we constantly have to remove from a room, which is hot, to make it cool, or if it's cold, to make it hot. So that's the volume of the air that we constantly exchanging with outside air. So that, I mean, with the air conditioned air, I'm sorry. So that represents the volume. Finally, if you look at the 100% curve, you see on that 100% curve, there are a whole bunch of numbers. These numbers represent dew point temperature. Now, the dew point temperature is basically, if you look up early in the morning during a spring or early winter time, you see that there is no droplets of water on your grass or on the windshield of your car, and there's no rain. And those droplets, those are the dew that we call it the dew because it's just an air bubble that the moisture is in it. And because it's like a droplets of water, it's 100% saturated. That's why we call it the dew point temperature. So those are basically what you're going to find in a psychrometric chart. Now, I figured out, since you guys didn't do too good in the first exam, and we don't know what's going to happen in the second one and the final, so I decided rather to cover chapter 14 in entirety and get you involved in all the equations and solving the problems and all of that, I decided to give you a 15 free point on your final exam. And that 15 free point is, I'm going to give you one problem and ask you to look at the psychrometric chart, find various parameters. Simple as that. We're going to do some exercise, see how easy it is. And I'm going to give you homework for that so you can do that at home. This should take you 2 or 3 minutes and get 15 points. That's how I decided to boost up your grade so I can bring everybody up. What do you guys think?
Thank you very much. That's much appreciated.
All right. Not a problem. My pleasure. So that's the reason I'm just covering this psychrometric chart. Now, if you do have your textbook, please open it up. I'm going to do a couple of examples. I want you to get the hang of it because it's very crucial down the road for you guys to know what's happening. For instance, let's see if, now, as you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, seven parameters involved. If you have two of them, you should be able to find the other five through the psychometric chart. So it's very simple, very easy to do that. Let me see one of the examples. Okay. All right. Let's see if I'm giving the dry bulb temperature of 32 degrees Celsius. So 32 degrees Celsius is really very uncomfortable. It's hot. And a relative humidity of 30%. So that shows that it's a hot and a dry air. Now we want to find all the other five parameters related to these, two parameters. So I come in a dry bulb temperature, I find the point that it says 32 degrees Celsius. Then I look at these green lines that is a curve of phi, and I find the one with 30%. So let's see this one represent 30%. So what I do, I just draw a line perpendicular to this axis until I hit the 30% relative humidity. So this, at this point, this becomes my point A. So this is, let's call that point A. So based on these two parameters, I find where that point lands in the psychometric chart. So if I want to find omega, I simply draw a line, go to the right, this becomes omega of A. Now, if I look at that, does anybody have their textbook with them?
Yeah, I have my chart open.
Okay. If you have that, you find this omega to be 8.9 gram of H2O divided by the gram of dry air. So that is the value of omega. Now, did you see that, Arthur?
Yeah.
All right, good. Now, if I want to find the value of H, the enthalpy, I draw a perpendicular line from this point, a perpendicular line to the H-axis. So I go straight up and I hit the H-axis. Here, I will find the value of H of A. And in this case, the enthalpy becomes 55 kilojoule per kilogram. Now let's see if I want to find I don't have the rest of this stuff. That's kind of crazy. Okay, and here. Now, if I want to find, this is, well, this was easy. The phi, h of a, omega was easy. Now, if I want to find dew point, I draw a line opposite of an omega direction going this way, parallel to that. Of course, my drawing is not that good. Until I hit the 100% saturated, line. If I can fix this. So this becomes my dew point temperature for A. And then the other two parameters is a little bit tricky. If I want to find the dry bulb temperature, I will look at these maroon lines. And I look at my point A is pretty close to this one, further away from that. So I read the top one, I read the bottom one, and since I'm closer to this, I pick a number that is pretty close to this line. That becomes my wet bulb temperature for point A, which is somewhere right there. Similarly, for the volume, if I look at the blue lines, and I notice that my point A is between this blue line and this blue line. And I'm closer to this one, so I make an assumption of what would be my volume laying between these, two volume lines. And that becomes my volume, for point A. So that's how you practice. You go around the table, you find various values by having, if given two values, we can find the other 5 parameters. Now, keep in mind, the 2 values that you have, they have to cross each other. If I give you omega and dew point, you cannot find the rest of it. Because omega and dew point in the same line, they're not crossing each other. The way I can find point A, that phi and these 32 degrees, they can cross, so I can identify my point A. Now, why do we do this? We do this is our point. These are the conditions for that point. Now, what do I want? I want to bring this to 20 degrees Celsius and higher relative humidity. So what I wanted to do, if I want to design the air conditioning for the summertime, I want to come here at 20 degrees Celsius and make it a 60% relative humidity. So this is basically my point B. So this line will determine my design path. That I'm going from point A, that it's an existing condition, to point B, that it's my desired condition. So if that would be the case, that's what I want. Once I find point B, I can find all the other parameters related to point B. And that's how I can determine how much volume of air I need to put into it, how much energy, because once I find this energy that I need to put in is equal to what? Mass times enthalpy. Now, I can say enthalpy of A minus enthalpy of B. This is the amount of energy or cooling that I need to put into the system in order to take it from point A to point B. How much volume of air I need to do, that determines between V1, V of A, and V of B. So all of that is basically how we design air conditioning. So let's do a few more practice. Do you have any questions before I go further?
I have a question.
Sure.
How did we get the omega at the beginning, the 8.9?
Once you find the point A, you go parallel to this axis, the dry bulb axis, until you hit the axis of omega. That's what you find omega. Right? What I did, I found point A based on the 30% and 32 degrees. Then I go to the right and find omega. If I go to the left, I find dew point. I take a perpendicular line, I find the enthalpy. As far as the wet bulb temperature and the volume concerned, seldom you find your point landing on these lines. So you need to basically make an assumption based on where your point is relative to those lines. So if this maroon line represents wet bulb temperature, my point A is between these two, I need to figure out what would be approximately that point. Again, we're not looking for accuracy that you have to be exact, accurate number. But just being in a ballpark, that will help a lot. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. We have a few minutes, maybe we can do. Oh, I forgot. The wet bulb temperature here is 19.4 degrees Celsius. The volume is 0.877 meter cubic per kilogram. And there's my dew point, if I can find that. My dew point temperature is 22 degrees Celsius. So for this example that we use 32 degrees and 30%, these are the values for omega, for wet bulb temperature, for volume at point A, dew point, and enthalpy. That's how we figure out all those numbers. Any questions? Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. This is not 22, that's 12. The dew point temperature is less than the wet bulb temperature and definitely much less than this temperature. So as you can see, we have the 32 degrees. What is our design point that we like to be? 19.4, almost 20%, 20 degrees Celsius. So that's what we like to see. That's what we like to do. Now, let's see. Now, let's change all of that to this one. Okay, now let's see if I have a dry bulb temperature of 80 degrees Fahrenheit and still having a 30% relative humidity. Eighty degrees Fahrenheit with 30% relative humidity. Again, I find the 80 degrees Fahrenheit line on the, English unit psychometric chart. I draw a perpendicular line until I hit the 30%. That identifies my point A. Now that I have my point A, I draw a parallel line to this axis or perpendicular line to omega axis, whichever you prefer saying it. In this case, my omega becomes 0.0068 pound mass of H2O divided by pound mass of dry air. My enthalpy becomes 27.1, 27.1 BTU per pound mass. My wet bulb temperature becomes 60 degrees Fahrenheit. My volume would be 13.7 cubic feet per pound mass. And my dew point temperature is 45 degrees Fahrenheit. I wish you had your textbook with you, you could follow me, and you could see all these numbers. Please practice this. I'm going to do some more examples, but practice this on your own. Pick two numbers, any two numbers. Pick dry bulb and wet bulb temperature because they cross each other. Pick enthalpy and relative humidity, or omega and enthalpy. And try to find the other 5 parameters. If you practice this in 2 minutes, you get 15 free points, plus all other free points you have. Because there will be one question from chapter 9, and the TS or a PV diagram for that is on your textbook. So you can copy that, get 10 points there. Then a chapter 10 question, you can copy that TS diagram from your textbook and get another 15 points there. Then on chapter 11, you do a TS diagram, you get another 10 points. So 10, 20, 35, 15, that is 50 points of your final exam are given to you for free. All you need to do, worry about the other 50%. That's not bad, huh? So that's how you can improve your grade and just boost up your grade. Now, next time, I'm going to do a couple more, and please, for your own sake, bring your textbook, and if you have again, ebook, print these two psychometric charts, have a ruler handy, and let's see if you can follow me. I'm going to put numbers here. You tell me what you see. And if you practice that, you get an easy 15 points. So I'm going out of my way to help you guys out, to boost your grade since you didn't do too good in the first exam. Now it's up to you if you want to help yourself. If you don't, then there's nothing I can do about it. All right, I'll see you on Wednesday. Of course, we have a homework number 3 is due, which I'm going to solve that problem first for chapter 11. And then after that, if you have time, we do some examples here. If not, definitely the next Monday, we're going to go in more details on this one. All right, you guys take care of yourself. Have a good rest of the day, and I'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
By the way, if you guys want to stick around and talk to me, you're more than welcome.